The mountains of old Earth stood silent under the gray sky. Winds moved through broken valleys where trees grew in twisted shapes and rivers carved their way through stone. Hidden beneath those mountains was a secret so ancient that even the people of Earth had forgotten it. The chamber was sealed by walls of black stone, smooth as glass, carved by hands that were not remembered. For ages, it had waited, untouched by time, untouched by war, untouched by the rise and fall of human cities. Inside that chamber, the air was still. No dust moved, no sound reached within. Yet at the heart of it, on a wide platform of shining metal, something rested. It was tall, shaped like a man yet larger, covered in layers of silver armor that glowed faintly in the dark. The armor looked alive, as if it breathed with slow rhythm. The being inside had slept for longer than the oldest records of humankind. He was the guardian of Earth, placed there in forgotten days when humans had fought not only for their world but for their place in the stars. The guardian did not breathe like men did. He did not dream. He simply rested, locked in stillness until the day would come when his purpose called him again. That day was close now. Far above, the world was changing. Humanity had grown into machines and towers, into crowded cities and long highways that lit up the night. Yet they no longer remembered the wars their ancestors had fought beyond the sky. To them, the stars were places of wonder, not battlefields of survival. They had forgotten the threats that once descended on their world. But the universe had not forgotten. Beyond the edge of the solar system, signals whispered. Alien ships drifted in the dark, listening, waiting. They had believed Earth was broken and weak, a world that had no guardians left. For generations, they had told themselves the old warnings were lies, myths born of fear. Now they would discover how wrong they were. The first spark came within the chamber itself. It began with a faint hum, so soft it was almost silence. The floor beneath the guardian lit with a thin line of blue light, spreading outward in circles. The walls of the chamber answered, glowing with patterns of unknown symbols. Dustless air grew heavy, and the ground shook as if the mountain had woken from sleep. The guardian's fingers twitched. The armor's surface shifted like water. A slow breath, deep and endless, passed through the stillness. His eyes opened, two burning points of pale gold. The long silence of centuries ended in that moment. The guardian rose from the platform with slow power, the sound of metal echoing in the chamber. His steps were heavy, yet each one made the glowing lines brighter. He stood tall, nearly twice the height of any human, yet shaped with the same form of two arms, two legs, and a face hidden behind a smooth mask. His presence filled the chamber like a storm waiting to break. Memory returned to him in waves. He saw battles fought above burning worlds. He saw fleets of ships that darkened the sky, broken apart by his hand. He remembered the oaths sworn to the people of Earth, to protect them from enemies they would never know. Most of all, he remembered the moment he was sealed away, told to sleep until the time of need came again. That time was now. The mountain trembled as hidden machines deep in the rock turned once more. Great pillars of metal moved, shifting as gears larger than houses spun. The old builders had prepared for this moment, and their design remained alive. A path opened from the chamber, a long tunnel of shining stone that led upward toward the surface. The guardian did not hesitate. He began to walk, each step echoing like thunder in the hollow space. Above ground, the sky grew darker as clouds gathered. Birds flew in restless circles, sensing the change. In the valleys, people in distant villages felt the tremors and looked toward the mountains, wondering if an earthquake had begun. None of them could know that something far greater was happening. The Guardian reached the mouth of the tunnel. Light from the surface broke through for the first time in ages, spilling across his armor. He paused, standing still as the wind touched him. The air of Earth was fresh, filled with the scent of rain and stone, and it stirred memories deep inside him. He was home again. He raised his head to the sky. The clouds moved across the heavens, hiding the stars beyond. Yet he could sense what the people could not. Far out there, in the cold space between suns, eyes were watching. Ships were moving. The galaxy had noticed Earth again. The Guardian clenched his hand, and the armor rippled with power. He had returned not to rest but to fight. His purpose was as clear as the mountain air. Earth was his charge, and no empire among the stars would take it. The heavens would learn once more why humanity had survived when others had fallen. The Guardian of Earth was awake. Far beyond the blue skies of Earth, in the silent reaches of space, signals spread outward like ripples in a vast ocean. The moment the Guardian had awakened, the chamber's pulse had touched the stars. It was not meant for human ears, but the galaxy was filled with listeners. Across countless systems, machines designed to detect the smallest flicker of energy caught the signal. On a world of endless deserts, tall beings with skin like stone gathered in their council hall. They studied the faint wave, and silence filled the chamber as fear grew. Old tales had warned of a guardian hidden on Earth, a weapon of humans that had once brought destruction to fleets far greater than theirs. For centuries they had believed Earth was safe to ignore. Now they whispered to one another in low voices, for the signal matched the patterns spoken of in their ancient records. In a distant system where golden towers touched the sky, another council watched the readings. Their leader, a tall figure with silver eyes, turned pale as the numbers appeared on the screen. He had been taught as a child that the Guardian was only a myth, a tale told to frighten young ones into obedience. Yet the machines did not lie. The signal was real, and it had come from Earth. The room filled with unease as the truth spread among them. The galaxy had grown used to thinking of Earth as a quiet place, a small world with no reach beyond its star. Humans were seen as a young species, busy with their own struggles, not ready to walk among the great empires. To most, they were harmless, unworthy of fear. But deep in the hidden corners of history, the truth had never been forgotten. Earth was the world that had once resisted, the world that had forged a guardian when no other species dared. Now, as the signal moved from system to system, old fears returned. In the cold darkness of deep space, warships that belonged to a proud empire drifted near the edge of the solar system. They were there to watch Earth, to make certain the humans did not rise too quickly. The commanders of those ships received the signal first, for they were closest. The message sent waves of panic through their fleet. Reports flew back to their capital, warning that something on Earth had reawakened. Inside the flagship, the commander stood at the viewing window. His eyes, black and sharp, gazed at the blue planet shining in the distance. To him, Earth had always seemed small, weak, a world without unity. Yet as he looked at it now, he felt a weight in his chest. He remembered the stories told by his ancestors, of ships torn apart by a single warrior, of fleets scattered by a force no weapon could break. He had laughed at those stories once. He did not laugh now. The commander gave the order to prepare. The fleet would not wait for Earth to grow strong. They would strike before the Guardian gained his full power. It was their chance to end the threat before it rose again. Engines roared to life, and weapons systems came online. Across the fleet, thousands of soldiers armed themselves, ready to descend upon Earth. Back on Earth, the Guardian stood upon the mountain peak, his golden eyes watching the horizon. Though the humans of the world could not see beyond their skies, he could feel it. The stars spoke to him in a language older than words. He knew ships were moving. He knew fear had already spread among the empires. His awakening was no secret. The heavens had heard, and the heavens were unsettled. He walked down from the mountain, his steps heavy but sure. In the valleys below, humans saw him for the first time. Farmers dropped their tools as they stared at the tall armored figure striding past. Children pointed with wide eyes, while their parents pulled them close, unsure whether to run or to kneel. None of them understood who he was, yet they felt his presence like the approach of a storm. The guardian did not speak to them. His duty was not to seek worship but to prepare. He made his way toward the old ruins hidden in the forest, places where machines of the past still rested. These were the tools once used by his kind, forgotten by the people of Earth but never truly dead. With a wave of his hand, ancient lights flickered back to life, casting pale glow upon stone walls. Machines stirred, answering his call. The guardian knew the first strike would come soon. The empires could not allow him to remain unchallenged. They feared what he represented. They feared humanity rising behind him. He had faced such fear before, and he knew how it always ended. The more they feared, the harder they struck, and the harder they fell. Far across the galaxy, councils argued, leaders shouted, and fleets prepared. But none could deny the truth. The guardian of Earth had awakened. His presence was no myth, no legend. It was real, and it had shaken the heavens. As the night settled over the mountains, the guardian lifted his gaze once more to the stars. He did not fear the fleets gathering against him. Instead, he waited. His time of rest was over. His time of battle was beginning again. The heavens trembled, and the galaxy held its breath. The guardian walked through the silent forest, each step stirring leaves and branches as if the land itself bowed before his return. He did not move with haste, yet every stride carried purpose. He was not a man, not a machine, but something between both, bound by duty that had not ended even after centuries of sleep. The forest opened into a clearing where ancient stones stood half buried in the soil. Vines wrapped around broken pillars, and moss covered the carvings of symbols no human alive could read. To the people of the nearby villages, it was nothing more than a ruin of old times, but the guardian knew it well. This place had been a command post long ago, where he and others like him had prepared for battles among the stars. He reached out his hand and pressed it against one of the tall stones. At once, hidden lights sparked to life beneath the moss, glowing lines spreading like rivers across the surface. The ground shook lightly, and the ruins responded to his touch. Machines buried deep below awakened, humming with energy. For a moment, the guardian stood still. Memories surged into him, unbroken by the years. He remembered the skies burning red as enemy ships filled the heavens. He remembered the cries of humans standing together when all seemed lost. He remembered the oath he had sworn to protect this world, even if it meant he would never see rest again. In his mind, the images were clear. He saw the fleet of the enemy, vast and endless, approaching Earth long ago. He had stood alone in orbit, armored and ready, while the ships rained fire down on him. But he had not fallen. He had cut through them like a storm tearing through clouds. His armor had glowed, his weapons had answered his will, and the fleets had broken. That was the first time the stars had feared Earth. He remembered comrades too, others created with purpose like him. Some had fallen in battle, their forms scattered in the void, their names carried away with silence. Others had vanished into the dark, never to return. He alone had been placed into the chamber beneath the mountain, chosen to endure, chosen to wait. The weight of their memory pressed on him now, yet it did not weaken him. It made him stronger. The guardian lowered his hand, and the glowing symbols around the ruins faded into steady light. The ancient command systems were ready once again. He spoke, his voice deep and calm, though no human words came from his lips. It was the language of the machines, a command older than any human tongue. The ruins answered, rising panels and screens unfolding from the earth. Data filled his vision, streams of information from hidden satellites that still circled the planet. Though time had passed, though many systems had fallen silent, some remained. They showed him the truth. Beyond the edge of the solar system, ships were moving. Alien fleets were preparing to strike, just as he had expected. The Guardian closed his eyes. His thoughts went back further, to the very moment of his creation. He remembered the halls where humans had worked side by side, building him with their own hands. They had not been great in number, nor rich in resources, yet they had carried a spirit unmatched by any empire. They had shaped him with will and sacrifice, gifting him the strength they could not carry themselves. He was their shield, their weapon, their last chance against the darkness. Though they had long since forgotten, though their children's children lived without knowledge of him, he had never forgotten them. Humanity had stumbled, divided itself, risen and fallen many times since he had closed his eyes in the chamber. Yet he could still feel the spark inside them. The same fire that had built him had not died. The Guardian opened his eyes. His golden gaze swept the sky above. He knew the enemy would not wait. They feared what he could become, so they would come swiftly, hoping to end him before his strength returned in full. That was always their way. Fear drove them more than reason. He turned and began walking back through the forest. Animals scattered at the sight of him, yet the land seemed to welcome his presence. The villagers who glimpsed him from afar whispered in awe, uncertain whether he was a spirit, a god, or something else. None dared approach, yet none could look away. The Guardian carried no doubt. He was no god. He was no spirit. He was a servant of humanity, bound by duty, bound by promise. His time of waiting was over, and the time of battle drew near. As night fell over earth, the Guardian climbed a ridge and stood high above the valleys. The stars stretched across the dark sky, cold and countless. He gazed upward, and in the silence, the memories of ancient battles burned in his mind like fire. He had fought before, and he would fight again. The heavens would learn once more why humanity endured when so many others had fallen. The Guardian remembered. And because he remembered, he was ready. In the black sea of space, beyond the orbit of the farthest planets, a fleet gathered. Ships shaped like long blades drifted in formation, their hulls dark as shadow. They belonged to an empire that had feared Earth for centuries. Now their leaders had given the order to strike before the Guardian could fully rise. To them, Earth was a fire that had to be put out before it grew into a storm. The commander of the fleet stood within the great hall of his flagship. Around him, glowing maps of the solar system floated in the air. He studied the blue sphere of Earth with cold eyes. His officers waited in silence. None dared question his orders. They all knew the stories, but they also knew their empire demanded action. To hesitate was to show weakness, and weakness was not allowed. Engines roared as the fleet moved forward, breaking through the emptiness with streams of white fire. Each ship carried weapons strong enough to level cities. The commander believed that even if the Guardian had returned, he could not face such numbers. Confidence spread through the fleet, but deep inside, a shadow of fear remained. On Earth, the Guardian already knew they were coming. The ruins in the forest had shown him the movements of the enemy ships. He stood on the mountain peak, his golden eyes staring at the sky. Though the stars looked calm, he could feel the weight of war pressing closer. In the villages below, people felt unease without knowing why. They saw the Guardian standing tall against the horizon, silent and unmoving, like a statue carved from the will of the world. Children whispered to each other, calling him the Iron Watcher. Elders warned their families to stay inside, sensing that something great was about to happen. Night passed into dawn. The sun rose over the mountains, painting the valleys in gold. At that very moment, the alien fleet crossed into the inner system. Their weapons powered up. Energy crackled along their hulls. They prepared to fire upon Earth. The first wave came without warning. Bolts of burning light streaked down through the sky, aimed at the mountains where the Guardian had awakened. The ground shook as fire tore through stone. Trees burst into flames, and the roar of destruction filled the valleys. Villagers cried out in fear as the heavens rained fire upon their world. But the Guardian did not fall. From the heart of the storm, he rose. His armor shone like a second sun, reflecting the fury of the enemy back at them. He lifted his hand, and the ancient power within him answered. A shield of energy spread out, wide and unbroken, catching the fire before it reached the villages below. The people looked on in awe as the sky itself seemed to bend around him. With a single step, the Guardian leapt into the air. The ground cracked beneath the force, and in the next breath, he was no longer bound to earth. He rose higher and higher, his body wrapped in light, until he broke through the clouds and reached the edge of space. The alien fleet met him there. The first ship fired. A beam of white energy, strong enough to shatter mountains, cut through the void. The Guardian raised his arm, and the beam struck his shield, scattering into fragments of harmless light. He did not falter. Instead, he surged forward with speed beyond sight. In a flash, he struck the ship, his hand glowing with power. The hull split apart, torn open as if it were paper. Fire spilled into the darkness, and the ship broke into pieces. The other ships answered at once. Dozens of beams and missiles filled the void, converging on him from every side. For a moment, the heavens burned with light. Yet when the fire faded, the Guardian still stood. His armor shimmered, unbroken, his eyes burning brighter than before. He moved through them like a storm. Every strike of his hand tore through ships. Every wave of his arm sent enemy weapons back upon their own fleet. The stars echoed with silent explosions as one vessel after another fell to his power. The commander of the fleet watched in horror as his proud armada broke apart before a single warrior. The fear that had been buried in his heart now rose in full. The old stories were not lies. The Guardian was real, and he was unstoppable. On Earth, the people saw lights flashing across the sky, distant battles painting the heavens with fire. They watched in silence, their fear turning into wonder. For the first time, they understood that the figure who had walked among them was no mere legend. He was their protector, and he was fighting for them. One by one, the alien ships fell. The commander gave the desperate order to retreat, but it was too late. The Guardian descended upon the flagship itself, his hand glowing with power greater than any weapon. He tore through its defenses, and the ship erupted in a wave of fire that lit the void. Silence followed. The fleet was gone. Only broken pieces drifted in the endless dark. The Guardian stood alone, shining like a star above his world. He had defended Earth once again. But he knew this was only the beginning. The first strike had failed, yet others would come. The galaxy had seen his return, and fear would drive them to act. More fleets would gather, greater than this one, but he was ready. His purpose had returned, and his strength was unbroken. The heavens had tried to crush Earth, and they had failed. The void of space was never truly silent. Signals always moved between worlds, carrying trade routes, commands, and warnings. When the Guardian destroyed the invading fleet near Earth, the echoes of that battle spread faster than light. Across the galaxy, receivers caught the faint pulse of destroyed ships, the burning remains of an armada that had once been considered unstoppable. On a world of crystal towers, where the sky glowed green from the light of twin suns, a council gathered. Leaders of the Empire sat around a wide table, their faces filled with unease. They had expected reports of victory, news of Earth broken before it could resist. Instead, they received fragments of communication filled with terror. The last message from the commander of the fleet was a single word, shouted before silence swallowed it. Guardian. The word moved through their empire like a shadow. It was spoken in markets, in schools, in halls of power. Children whispered it at night, and soldiers stood in training grounds with unease heavy in their hearts. For ages, they had taught their people that Earth was weak, that the myths of the Guardian were only old tales. Now those myths had risen into truth. In another corner of the galaxy, among the stone palaces of a warlike race, generals stood before their ruler. They displayed images taken from distant observers, a single armored figure moving through the enemy fleet, ships falling one after another. The ruler gripped the arms of his throne, his voice shaking with anger as he asked why no one had prepared for this. His generals lowered their heads, for none had believed the Guardian would ever return. Fear spread not only among rulers but also among ordinary beings. Traders spoke of Earth as if it were cursed. Pilots carried rumors that one man could crush entire fleets. Miners on distant moons told each other that if the Guardian looked upon them, no wall could keep him out. The galaxy had many powers, many empires, but none could ignore the weight of such fear. Some leaders called for caution. They argued that Earth should be left alone, that disturbing the Guardian further would only lead to disaster. Others called for unity, demanding that all empires join forces before humanity rose again. The councils were filled with shouting voices, and no agreement could be reached. The heavens trembled not because of war alone, but because of uncertainty. Back on Earth, the Guardian stood upon the highest cliffs, his golden eyes watching the horizon. He could feel the fear reaching across the stars. It was not a weapon of his making, yet it served his purpose. For fear weakened those who wished to harm his people. Still, he knew fear alone would not hold them back forever. They would return, stronger than before, for empires rarely accepted defeat without seeking revenge. In the villages, people spoke of what they had seen. Some believed the Guardian was sent from the heavens to protect them. Others feared that his presence would bring more destruction to their world. Yet slowly, hope began to grow. Farmers looked to the skies without despair. Children dreamed of futures beyond their small valleys. Humanity, once uncertain of its place in the galaxy, began to sense that it was part of something greater. The Guardian did not rest. He returned to the ruins in the forest, where the ancient machines still stirred. With each passing day, he reawakened more of the old systems, connecting them into a network that spread across Earth. Satellites long forgotten came back online. Weapons hidden deep underground powered up. The shield of Earth grew stronger with his touch. Across the galaxy, spies and watchers reported every change. Each signal from Earth was studied with care, each movement of the Guardian measured with fear. Armies drilled harder, fleets were built faster, and leaders lost sleep as they planned their next move. The name of Earth was once spoken as a small, unimportant world. Now it was spoken with respect, and with terror. In a hidden chamber on a distant moon, a secret meeting took place. Representatives of several empires gathered, their voices hushed. They agreed on one truth. If Earth rose again, the balance of power in the galaxy would break. Some wanted to strike at once. Others begged for patience, hoping the Guardian would vanish as suddenly as he had returned. Their arguments filled the chamber, but no peace was found. The galaxy was no longer calm. Fear had taken root, and fear changed everything. The Guardian, standing tall under the night sky of Earth, knew this well. His battle with the fleet had not ended the threat. It had only begun a new chapter. The heavens had frozen in terror, but terror would not last forever. Soon, the empires would choose. They would either bow in silence or come with greater force. He clenched his hand, his armor glowing with quiet power. Whatever choice they made, he would be ready. For he was the Guardian of Earth, and his purpose was unbroken. The Guardian walked through the forests and valleys of Earth, his golden eyes scanning the horizon. He could feel the pulse of the planet, the heartbeat of the people below. Humanity had seen him now, and something had awakened inside them. Fear had turned into curiosity, and curiosity had grown into hope. In the cities, people stopped their daily routines to look at the sky. News of the Guardian's battle with the alien fleet had spread quickly. Reports of the destruction he had caused to the enemy and the safety he had preserved for Earth made leaders take notice. Governments that had once argued among themselves began to send messages to one another. They knew that if humanity were to survive the coming storms, they had to work together. Scientists gathered in laboratories, studying the ancient machines the Guardian had reactivated. They learned how to operate devices that had been dormant for centuries. Engineers repaired old satellites and powered up hidden weapons. Humanity began to remember the ingenuity that had built the Guardian in the first place. They worked together, not for profit, not for fame, but for survival and purpose. In the villages, farmers and children brought food and tools to the ruined forests where the Guardian had awakened. They could not fight the alien fleets themselves, but they could support the one who would. The Guardian accepted their offerings, moving among them with quiet strength. His presence inspired courage. His armor reflected the sunlight, and people felt a warmth in their hearts, a reminder that someone watched over them. For the first time in centuries, humanity began to unify. Rival nations, old enemies, put aside disputes. They shared resources, knowledge, and information. Communication lines opened across continents. The people understood that the Guardian alone could not defend them forever. They had to rise with him. The Guardian oversaw every action, his mind connected to the network of machines he had awakened. He coordinated efforts across the planet, ensuring that cities were prepared and that the population remained safe. Each plan he made considered not only the machines and weapons but the humans who would carry them. He knew that the strength of humanity came from its people, from their courage and intelligence. At night, the Guardian stood on the cliffs and looked up at the stars. The fleets that had fled were regrouping, sending signals to their home systems. He could sense the fear in their ranks, but he also knew it would not last. Empires did not surrender easily. The Guardian's return had reminded the galaxy of humanity's strength, but he could not fight alone forever. Leaders of Earth held meetings in cities and capitals, speaking of a united defense. Military officers worked with scientists to understand the Guardian's technology. Citizens trained to operate communication systems and manage resources. Humanity was awakening, slowly but surely, into a force capable of standing against the universe. In the forests, children watched the Guardian practice movements that seemed impossible for any human. They imagined themselves rising one day, carrying the same courage in their hearts. Teachers told stories of past battles, blending history with hope. Humanity remembered itself, and in doing so, grew stronger. The Guardian moved among the people without words. His presence alone was a teacher. He showed them that fear could be faced, that courage could be learned, and that unity could overcome even the most powerful enemies. In every village, every city, the people began to understand that they were no longer alone. They had a protector, and they had each other. Across the world, the night sky burned with light as machines hummed to life. Hidden weapons, satellites, and ancient defenses powered up, guided by the Guardian. Humanity watched in awe, their hearts rising with pride. They were no longer helpless, no longer divided. They were becoming a species that could face the galaxy without fear. The Guardian turned his gaze to the stars once more. The alien empires would return, more determined than before. Their fleets would be larger, their weapons more deadly. But humanity had changed. They had remembered their courage, their ingenuity, and their unity. They stood behind the Guardian, ready to defend their home. For the first time in history, Earth was not alone. The Guardian had awakened, and humanity had risen with him. Together, they would face the heavens, and the stars would learn that humanity was no longer a weak world. The Guardian lowered his head to the people around him, and in that silent gesture, he gave them a promise. He would fight for Earth, but they too must stand tall. Their strength, courage, and unity would shine brighter than any weapon in the galaxy. Humanity had awakened, and now they were ready to take their place among the stars. The heavens trembled not only in fear but in anticipation. Earth would no longer be a forgotten world. The sky above Earth was alive with light. Satellites, weapons, and machines that had been long hidden hummed together in a perfect network. Humanity had learned, grown, and united under the watchful eyes of the Guardian. From the mountains to the oceans, people watched the stars with hope and determination. They knew the enemy would come again, but this time, Earth would be ready. Far beyond the solar system, fleets gathered. Armadas of alien empires moved with precision and power, larger than any before. They believed their strength would overwhelm the planet that had resisted a single fleet. They did not understand that Earth was no longer alone, that the Guardian had awakened humanity itself. The Guardian stood on a high ridge, his golden eyes scanning the approaching fleets. His armor glowed with energy, and his presence alone seemed to bend the wind around him. Below, humans manned stations, prepared weapons, and monitored every movement of the enemy. Together, they were a force no empire had expected. The first ships entered the system. Beams of light cut through space, weapons ready to strike. The Guardian lifted his hand, and a shield of energy spread over Earth. The beams collided with it and shattered, falling harmlessly into the void. Humanity watched as the sky became a battlefield, but the Guardian remained calm. He was not just a fighter, he was a protector. With a single leap, he rose into the void, moving faster than any ship could follow. The alien fleets fired on him, but their attacks bounced off his armor. He struck the first wave, tearing through ships with precision. Explosions lit the darkness like stars, and one by one, the enemy ships fell. From Earth, people cheered. Their faith in the Guardian and in themselves had grown into unshakable courage. Soldiers moved with confidence, engineers guided weapons with skill, and scientists controlled defenses with clarity. Earth had become a fortress, a living network of human ingenuity and the Guardians' power. The Guardians' golden eyes scanned the fleets ahead. The enemy commander, a figure known for cruelty and strategy, had brought the largest armada yet. The Guardian moved forward, his presence alone causing hesitation in the enemy ranks. Ships wavered, engines faltered, and soldiers whispered of the legends they had thought were myths. The Guardian was real, and he was unstoppable. With a swift strike, he destroyed the lead ship, sending shockwaves through the fleet. Confusion spread. Commands were delayed, formation broke, and fear took hold. The Guardian moved through them like a storm. Every movement was precise, every strike decisive. The armada crumbled under his hands. The people of Earth watched as the skies above turned from chaos to victory. They realized that they were not just witnessing a battle, they were part of it. Their unity, their courage, and their preparation had made the Guardian stronger. He was no longer alone in his fight. Humanity itself had become a weapon, a shield, and a force to be reckoned with. The enemy commander, seeing his fleet destroyed and his plans failing, tried to retreat. The Guardian did not give them that chance. He moved with unstoppable speed, cutting off the path of escape. Ships were caught, destroyed, or forced to surrender. The armies that had come to crush Earth were now defeated. In the quiet after the battle, the Guardian descended back to Earth. His armor reflected the sunrise, and humans stood tall to greet him. Children ran to the cliffs to see the protector of their world. Farmers, engineers, and leaders looked up with respect and gratitude. The Guardian had not only defended Earth but had reminded humanity of its strength. From the edge of the galaxy, other empires watched. The news of the defeat spread like wildfire. Entire systems paused, realizing that Earth was no longer a weak planet. Humanity had awakened, guided by the Guardian, and the stars themselves had learned a lesson long forgotten. The Guardian turned his gaze toward the heavens. The wars were not over, but the balance had shifted. Earth had proven that it was no longer prey. Humanity, united and courageous, was ready to face whatever came next. He had fulfilled his role, yet his vigilance remained. On Earth, people began rebuilding, preparing for the future with hope and confidence. Cities, villages, and forests were alive with human determination. The Guardian watched over them, a silent promise in his golden eyes. They had fought together, they had risen together, and they would face the galaxy together. The heavens had frozen in terror when he awoke. Now they yielded to the strength of humanity. Earth was protected, and its people had learned that their courage and unity could overcome any threat. The Guardian remained vigilant, but humanity itself had become the light that would shine across the stars. The age of fear had ended. A new age had begun, and the galaxy would never forget the rise of Earth and its Guardian.